Okay, now we're going to move into chapter 5. In what different ways does the Bible talk about the sin of adultery? All right, so one of the ways that the Bible talks about adultery is physical adultery or sexual adultery. What's another way the Bible talks about adultery? Okay, in your thoughts. Okay, you can commit adultery in your mind and in your thoughts, or the sin of lust. What else? Okay, and explain that. Okay. Yes. The Bible talks about spiritual adultery, being unfaithful to our God. The Bible talks about that as being adultery also. Okay? All right. Here in chapter 5, and over the next few chapters, we're going to read about an adulterous woman. Now, this could be Solomon warning his son about the danger and harm of marital unfaithfulness, and he might have a specific woman in mind. Or it could be Solomon warning his son about spiritual unfaithfulness, straying from God, and he uses this adulterous woman as a metaphor. Personally, you don't have to agree with me on this, but personally, I think that Solomon, because of, as Ellen was saying, because of his personal experiences and his troubles with women, I think he's actually talking about both. I think he understands the temptation of lust and the danger that it can do, and he sees in that a clear demonstration of how sin and temptation act and how they can destroy a person's life. That's my personal understanding of what Solomon does here. Now, it's been referred to a couple of times. What was Solomon's problem with women? Had too many of them, right? Keep something here in Proverbs 5. Turn to 1 Kings. So chapter 10 talks about the Queen of Sheba visiting Solomon because she'd heard everything about him, and he shows her all of his collections and all of his wealth and blah, blah, blah. Halfway through chapter 10, it explains Solomon's splendor. That's the heading that the NIV has, at least in my Bible here, over verses 14 through the end of the chapter. Talks about his riches, talks about the animals he collected. He talks about the articles in the palace, all the gold, all the silver, all the spices, all his slaves. Down in verse 26, it's kind of interesting. It says, Solomon accumulated. Solomon accumulated. And then at the beginning of chapter 11, it starts talking about the women he accumulated. Okay? Yeah, he was a collector of women. That's right, yes. Yeah, hoarder. So let's just, I'll go ahead and read. We're just going to look at chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. So it says, King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of David, his father, had been. Oh, somebody said that David had a woman problem. What was David's woman problem? Bathsheba was one of them. What else? How many wives did David have? He had several, right? Yeah. What was it, 7, 9, something like that? Okay? He didn't give his son a very good example to follow. And Solomon learned from it. Verse 5, it says, he followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. Okay, so his love for women led him astray. Led him astray. I personally believe that late in his life, Solomon saw the foolishness of that, and that he came back to God. All right, so Solomon had this problem with women, and now he is going to warn his son about the adulterous woman in Proverbs chapter 5. Whether this is a individual that Solomon has in mind, whether this is just sexual sin that Solomon is warning his son about, or whether this is a metaphor for all kinds of different temptations.